Good evening. I'd like to open the Finance and Facilities meeting. Just as a reminder, the meetings of the Mechanicsburg Area School District Board of Directors are being recorded and live streamed for the purpose of transparency and increasing public access. The live stream, along with recordings from previously held meetings, can be found on the school board's YouTube channel. At this time, we'll go to 2.01, which is construction change orders. Mr. Longwell?
Yeah. So Mr. Kastner's here this evening. He's our construction manager and always very supportive of these conversations. So as we kind of look at the attachments on the agenda, I would draw your attention to the first document, the change order summary. That to me is a good 50,000-foot view when you're taking kind of a temperature check of how are we doing with our change orders. So you look across the projects and you can see we're at 5% or less, with the exception of the Elmwood Academy site project, which was we talked in the previous months or previous year. That's a little bit of a unique outlier, but other than that, all of the other projects are at 5% or less, and that's significant because that's what we're looking for in that corridor in terms of our budget. We had established in all of our construction budgets 5% or less. I'll say really a tribute to Mr. Kastner, but the construction team, management team to keep our projects. You look down through the list and you see 2.5, 2.8, 3. And so I'm very pleased with the results. You know, that we were budgeting 5%, but coming in under on all of the different projects. So the summary by project is listed there. I will turn it over to Mr. Kastner here to talk a little bit about, in particular, one change order that we wanted to talk with the board about. If you go to
Just ask the question.
Oh yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Just so does those percentages reflect the change orders that are coming up tonight also, or is it just what's been
In
approved so far?
total, yeah. So it's actually in total inclusive of what's coming before the board tonight. So that's a good question. And I think our goal there is to measure the total cost of the project against that 5%, knowing that that's a good benchmark, if you will, to see how are we doing with change orders.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Unfortunately, I didn't look at the summary first. I looked at high school project 2 and project 3. So I freaked out because first column had 21.7% change order percent to it. So with ECI
Yeah.
at the very bottom, and the next, the low bar had 11%. So I guess now my question is, how does those 21.7 and 11% convert into, just 2 or 3%?
Yeah, no, I think it's a good question, and honestly, probably could add, as far as all the detailed change orders, we could probably add a reconciliation there. But over on the change order summary, to your question, Ms. Morgan, if you look at the high school project 2 and high school project 3, you can see we have a couple reconciling items there. And I agree, in total, it's like, well, that's a big number in terms of the change order. But contained in that number is the track change order, because we had done that as a change order. And so that was separate from kind of the 5% that we set aside from change orders. So on its face, to look at the $4 million, it looks a little deceiving. But then when you take out the track, which we had talked about separately, then that's a reconciling item and it brings it back into line with the 5%, which is what we would expect to see.
But not really technical. I mean, you can say that because you're kind of taking the track cost out then, right?
Right. So I would say, go ahead, I'm sorry.
That goes back to the discussion we had with the track project itself of, do we just have it as an additional project added within our bond investment, or do we add it as a change order? And because of some of the benefits we were able to reap by having it as a change order, we made the change order. So I see what you're saying. Kind of, 6 of one, half a dozen the other, but ultimately on the planning side of things, it was planned as a separate item. So even though we have now embedded it within these expenses, it's still, from our planning perspective, seen as a separate.
I think that's a good explanation. And I think, The other parallel I would draw is if you look a little bit up on the summary, Elmwood Academy is that way too. When we started the project, we started with a scope, the 5% budget, and then we added on some additional classrooms after the fact, which is in a lot of ways similar to the high school, that we started with a project, the scope, the 5%, and then we added the track on. So yeah, I think both are some, I guess I'll say reconciling items to get a better context around how we're doing this budget.
I see that. Thank you.
Yeah, no, that's good. If we just move over to, there's two other attachments, High School Project 2 and High School Project 3. High School Project 2, suffice it to say, just as a reminder, anything that doesn't have a date in the far right column is what hasn't yet been approved and is what we're hoping to focus on with the school board here. I won't go item by item. We can certainly have some conversation. If the board has questions about anything specifically, but I did want to point out one item in particular, was third column from the right, last page, Hauk roof repair due to moisture. So this change order is something that is yet to be completed. You'll see at $57,750, it is above the threshold of $50,000 where we would want to talk with the full board about that for pre-approval of that change order. And so as we've done in prior situations where it's been above 50,000, we usually would just have a separate agenda item because we didn't otherwise have change orders before the board for consideration. But because we already had a list of the change orders coming before the board, we wanted to just add it to the list. But then in the spirit of full transparency, call out that one in particular and talk about the fact that that one is not yet started, but it's $57,750, and we can talk a little bit about it.
That was really identified by recent scans of the roof area. So it's something that we really didn't even know about starting out. We were in a regular maintenance program of recoating. A good part of the existing, of course, the additions were done separately, including the natatorium as an addition. But there were some areas that showed up in the last few weeks as having got wet. Fortunately, most of those are not areas that were recoated already. So that we're not repeating work or anything like that. But that's where it came from. The best way to do it though is to add it on to house present work in terms of value. To the project and to you, would be to add it onto there because they are doing this on a continuing basis out there. They still have other areas of roof that they have to work on that were part of their project too.
Find any asbestos in there.
No, that's not good. It's
It seems to be.
something that wasn't identified and likely, I mean, we've been doing this project for 3.5 years now. So, likely there are some areas that took on water prior to their recoating, and now they're being identified. Whereas three or 4 or 5 years ago, when this was first put together, when the maintenance program was put together, probably was dry then.
Very good.
No,
Are
I
we-
did want to point out, we do have asbestos here.
Are we at a point now where we have the majority of the roof is going to be coated or treated in the different phases of this project?
Yes, at the high school, yes. Yes, it's just an ongoing thing right now. They just made a delivery of areas that they haven't done yet. Because of course they had to hold off in the cold weather too. So they're getting back on that. And now we've identified other areas, then now's the time.
The good point that I'm glad you made about the high school was, over the next 3 to 5 years, at some of the elementaries, we might have to come back at some point and recoat certain sections of those. But as we talked about with the board, our goal when we did all of the renovation projects was to maximize the useful life of infrastructure. And so if the roofs had a long enough life left, I'll say, we let some of those sections knowing that we'd have to come back in the future and probably recoat those. So nothing that's too terribly large, in talking with Mr. Hoffman, but I did just mention, again, in the spirit of transparency, that over the next 3 to 5 years, I'd expect to see some smaller roof recoating projects at the elementaries.
Yeah, I will say, I thought Eric did a really good job on how he had that set up too. We called it a roof map because there's so much roof up there and so many different sections of the roof. And he had that planned out with Hauk down to the T. I mean, it was about the most efficient way you could approach it until we got in the way with this project. So,
Any other questions? Okay, we'll move forward with that. 2.02 is the fund balance committee general fund. Slowwell,
Any opportunity to talk about Gatsby standards, it kind of right up my alley.
I'm sorry. Thank you, Mr. Cat.
You're welcome. Thanks, Dick.
Governmental Accounting Standards Board, number 54, statement number 54 deals with fund balance. And so this is an annual approval that we look at with the school board. I'd like to remind that it's a two-part approval. And so what we do every spring is we look at the categories of fund balance that we're setting aside in different reserves, just approving the categories. And then we come back in the fall after the audit's been finalized to then assign what are the actual balances in those categories that we want to set aside as, I'll say, savings or reserve. And so the first step is really procedural to just affirm the categories themselves, which haven't changed significantly from the prior year. And then again, a reminder, we'll be back in the fall to talk about the amounts.
So there's nothing we need to do at this point.
We will approve the categories at the June board meeting as presented, but outside of that, as far as assigning numbers, no, it'll come later this fall. So.
Great, thank you. And then the last item on the agenda, 2.03 is the construction financing budgets.
Well, good. This is talk about, a finish line here. When you think about our journey we've been on with construction, starting with feasibility study in 2015 that identified needs in particular at our elementaries, but also some needs at our middle school and high school. We started a series of projects to address enrollment needs, a growing enrollment, to address the mechanical and infrastructure, but also our academic program. And within our academic program, that idea of equity of facilities so that students had the same experience no matter what building they had been at. And so as the high school is wrapping up now, it's kind of a good time to reflect. Oops, sorry. It's a good time to reflect on that plan and where we've been since 2015, knowing that we're wrapping up those projects, but also that facilities planning is an ongoing series of projects, an ongoing series of needs, and that we'll have to continue to look at our facilities to make sure we're keeping up with our infrastructure and our buildings. Ultimately, that led to the facilities planning committee in 2024, where we said, we've done the renovation projects from 15 and on. We've looked at those buildings and how effective that's been in addressing our needs, but there's been new needs that have come up. Since we did our last feasibility study in 2015, we looked at that as part of a facilities planning committee in 2024, where we developed recommendations or priorities that would sort of guide our thinking or recommendations around the next 5 to 7 years. And when you think about that, in a lot of ways, useful lives of roofs or useful lives of mechanical equipment is a 15, 20, 25 year planning horizon. And so that gives that cyclical nature of facilities planning. With that, we know that we had a series of borrowings that connected to the feasibility study and the projects that ensued. Our goal with the facilities planning committee was to not only identify the priorities of the next 5 to 7 years, but also think about how we're going to fund them with a goal of funding them out of our reserves if possible, because our goal is to not issue any more debt in the short term. I'll say short term because, who knows the next 3 years, but, just that little caveat. But in the short term, our goal is to use our reserves and fund them in that way. So that leads us to, as we look at kind of the consolidation of our construction financing budgets, where are the funds coming from? And I would say from 2015 on, we had a series of borrowings over that 9 or 10 year period of time where we've been funding our construction funds. And so we've been working through the financing associated with that. Aside from that, we have our capital reserve fund, which really serves as our savings account. So it's kind of like your own personal home. You set money aside for a roof or an HVAC system, and maybe don't pay that out of your weekly paycheck, a bi-weekly paycheck. And in the same way for the school district, we want to avoid spikes in our general fund. And so we set aside significant projects into the capital reserve fund is what our goal is to fund them through that mechanism. And then finally, our debt service fund. Really is an in and out fund, I'll say, where we transfer money in, but we also pay our debt out on an annual basis. Over the years, we've accumulated funds there, though, and it has a reserve. That reserve can and should be used for facility projects. And so as we look at kind of consolidating the reserves and thinking about project financing and facilities planning, we've talked a lot about looking at these 3 buckets of construction funds, capital reserve fund, and debt service fund as available sources for the next 5 to 7 years. And so the next slide is a little bit of a reconciliation, I think maybe helps to put some numbers to that. I'll say the first section there that shows remaining funds, construction financing, shows the monies from the construction funds as we wrap up our projects. It shows the debt service fund. It shows the net amount of our capital reserve fund as it stands currently, less obligations, other known obligations. Our state grant for the middle school project, which will happen this summer. That's listed there because it is an available source to help pay for that project. So that was $1 million grant that we've gotten. And that brings total remaining funds to about $15.8 million. Now, I think we'd be remiss if we stopped there and just said, oh, there's $15.8 million, because you also have to reconcile the projects that are on the books to make sure that we're saying, okay, as we move through the summer, we already have identified the middle school project. We've identified the track change order, which goes back to Ms. Morgan's question, which I thought was a good one. It's independent of that 5% because it was an add-on to the project. And so we're reconciling it over here. Broad Street HVAC project is part of some of the known HVAC needs at our elementary schools. And so really of that $15.8 million, about 9.2 of it's spoken for through projects that are already on the books and that will be completing this summer and into the fall. So really what that does in terms of a bottom line is it kind of leads us to, we have about $6.5 million left for future projects as we think about the next 3, 5, and 7 years. That's not to say that 6.5 is a number set in stone, because we'll have some projects that will be coming out, smaller projects than say the middle school. But we do know we have facility needs. And so those do have some significant numbers attached to them. So we want to make sure we manage those available funds and then think about continuing opportunities to continue to grow the savings account, if you will, knowing that, again, facilities is an ongoing process there. So where that leads us is a reconciliation of the project funds, knowing that we do want to continue to talk about with the board the priorities from the facilities planning committee. And as we know, some of those priorities were wrapping up the feasibility study recommendations, which include the MMS project. There was new needs like the track, continuing the HVAC conversations at the elementary. And I know by way of preview, Mr. Panic has a little something here later this evening he's going to talk about. So in some ways, our presentations are connected, and that he's got some things on the facilities planning list of recommendations. And we wanted to talk about how we reconcile the funding side of it, knowing that we have some other priorities in terms of projects that we'd like to get to.
So the track renovations will come out of this.
Yes, these pots come out, yes.
So are you saying we're not gonna borrow any money for 7 years?
Well, I would hate to put a number.
5, 7
Yeah,
years,
in the near term, let's say. Yeah.
because you say short term, but like,
So I'll say it this way, for the middle school project, the track, Broad Street, I think for me, kudos to the board. I think the administration, it's a 9 or 10 year plan where we were incrementally borrowing all along the way to pay for all the projects. We were baking the debt service payments, the monthly mortgage payment, if you will, into the budget. And really, we were reaching the finish line on those elementary projects in the high school. We know that we have to reconcile the construction funds then against what we have in our capital reserve fund and the debt service fund to say, well, where do we go from here? And how do we fund those next 3, 5, and 7 year projects? And so our goal is, to the greatest extent possible, like the middle school project or the track or the HVAC, that we're using our reserves to help fund some of those projects. And so it's not to say we'll never borrow debt again, but as it relates to the current recommendations, we have identified a roadmap to utilize it.
if anything else that if I learned nothing else over the last 10 years, 6.5 is not very much.
No, and I think that's fair. And I think we do, I'll say this, as part of the normal budget process, even when we look at the capital reserve fund and general fund, we are having conversations, Dr. Betts, myself, Mrs. Ely, Mr. Hoffman, to talk about not only next year's budget, but when it comes to facilities, like what's the next 3 and 5 years hold. And so it's hard to just talk about the projects and priorities without trying to identify where the funding is coming from. And so that's part of what this exercise was, to know that we have some facilities plan recommendations on the table, but that we also want to make sure we're talking about the funding side of things. So
I think I would share, the last 10 years, $180 million in borrowing has been about getting our facilities to a place where we were ready to accept 400 kids per class. And those weren't really decisions. There were smaller decisions within the big decisions that we certainly had a lot of control over, but the reality was that we're faced with an enrollment that we had to be able to get our buildings ready to accommodate. And I think the board and the community should feel really proud of the fact that we're there in terms of having building space that is available to accept our students. I think now we're in this phase where we get to look more programmatically and say, okay, well, what are the other projects that we can identify as priorities to continue to enhance the program that we provide? It's not about making sure that there's a room for kids to go in, but now it's about, you know what, the track is in need of updates, and that's something that we need to be able to provide a better space for our kids. And again, to the board's credit, we made that decision to be able to invest in that. But those are investment decisions that we can make in a different way than what we've had to just to have rooms for kids over the last 10 years.
Oh, I know we've done a great job. I mean, we've accomplished a lot over the last 10 years that we should be proud of. And if anybody was at the high school this past weekend, the comments that were, was it 2 weekends ago? The comments you heard people say was amazing and, you know, very, very positive about the changes that we made. So
Just some points for clarity. So the construction fund, is that from borrowing? It's from all of the borrowings, closing out all of the projects. So the $180 million, we've certainly been incrementally borrowing along the way, but then we're marrying up all of the different project costs with the different borrowings, knowing that we also have the facility planning recommendations. And so that's where I personally am kind of excited to see all of this come together, because there's all these pieces to it. And you can finally see the picture coming through you. And as we collapse down those funds, then we can kind of turn to the next chapter and say, okay, we put both those borrowings and those projects behind us, but what does the next 3 to 5 to 7 years look like from a planning perspective? And how quickly does the capital fund replenish? So it doesn't have a dedicated funding stream outside of interest revenue. And so I think what my view of that would be two things I think about that. One is that in any given year, our goal in the general fund is always to break even, but if there is a surplus, well, that surplus helps to fund the capital reserve fund. We've done a nice job of strategically managing that over the years, not just since I've been here, but a credit also to Dr. Vandrew in his time here. And so those surpluses in the general fund can help to replenish the capital reserve fund in that way. And then some schools will actually, even in terms of the capital reserve fund, have a dedicated transfer every year, depending on what they see on the horizon. And so that's part of that long-term plan that we talked about with Dr. Bitts and the team, is looking at that 3, 5, 7-year plan. How do you balance that $6.5 million with some of the projects that we see coming down the pike? But also, if at some point we needed to, through the general fund, we could set up a transfer on an annual basis, kind of like what you do with your personal accounts, and might set some aside every month or every year into a savings account. We could do that too. So there's several options.
Other questions from the board?
A lot of our neighbors are beginning their financing plans of 5 and 10 years, and we're wrapping ours up. So we've got a little bit of envy from some of our neighbors. So I think it's been good.
Well, thank you for all the work you do to put it together and kind of manage it out. I know you said Dr. Vandrew set us up and got us going, but you continue to keep us moving in the right direction. So thank you for that. Thank you. So, that's all we have. Okay. Meeting is adjourned.
All right, good evening. I'd like to call to order the May 27th, 2025 work session. I'd like to announce the meetings of the Mechanicsburg Area School District Board of Directors are being recorded and live streamed for the purpose of transparency and increased public access. The live stream, along with the recordings from previously held meetings, can be found on the school board YouTube channel. Move on to item 2, student and staff recognition. Item 2.01, outstanding staff recognition. Dr. Bitts.
Great. Yeah, we've got a few recognitions tonight. First one being outstanding staff. We are having our full outstanding staff recognition at our June 10th meeting, just prior to that meeting. But we have one of our winners who isn't going to be able to be with us here that night. So we're very excited to be able to change things up a bit to be able to recognize her here tonight. So I'm going to invite Megan Longwell and Michelle Sharp to come forward there to the podium. Michelle is our winner. She works at the middle school, and Ms. Longwell will be sharing a little bit more with us, but she's our instructional support staff winner for outstanding staff for this past school year, working at the middle level. So Mrs. Longwell, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Good evening, members of the board, administrators, colleagues, and guests. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. I'm here to recognize someone whose impact on our school community for the past 8 years deserves to be celebrated. Our outstanding middle school instructional assistant, Michelle Sharp. Instructional assistants are often the unsung heroes of education. They work quietly behind the scenes, ensuring that students feel supported, seen, and capable of success. While some might debate just how quietly behind the scenes Sharp's work is, in the short 2 years that I've had the privilege of knowing and working closely with Michelle, renamed by my children and now affectionately known by my family as Pencil Pouch, I can say without a doubt that she has exemplified her role with unwavering dedication and heart. Each day, Michelle brings patience, positivity, and professionalism into the classroom. She works closely with students who need extra guidance, offering both academic support and emotional encouragement. What truly sets Michelle apart is more than her riz, but how she will go above and beyond her job description. Whether that means staying after school a few extra minutes to finish organizing and distributing paperwork, stepping in during challenging moments, or simply just being the talented baker, leaving sweet treats all around the building for all staff members to have a little comfort in their belly to take the edge off of a stressful day. Michelle has always been a go-to person. She is very resourceful and will often make it her mission to help find a solution to a problem. She develops a strong relationship with the students on each year's caseload, and that is why she contributes to their strengths and needs in all of the team discussions. What's most admirable about Michelle is not just her skill, but her character. She is reliable, compassionate, and has a great sense of humor. Her passion to assist others has helped shape a more inclusive, responsive, and a caring environment for our students. In short, Michelle Sharp is not only an outstanding instructional assistant, she is an indispensable part of our school family. Our classrooms are better because of her. Our students are stronger because of her. And our school is more successful because of her contributions. On behalf of our team and the students we serve, I want to express our deepest appreciation to Pencil Pouch, a story for another time, for her continued excellence and dedication. We are truly lucky to have you as a Wildcat team member at MMS. Thank you for continuing to make an impact. Thank you.
We have the board to present to you. Got the rush pickup for us. I'm sure you have it for tonight. And there'll be a check coming your way as well.
Thank you very much.
Checks are.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Very grateful. Thank you very much. Thank you. Not often speechless.
It's more like conversation.
Thank you.
Special.
Thank you.
Great. So we'll have a few more outstanding staff next time at 6:15 on June 10th. Couple student recognitions now as well. Yeah, our next item, 2.02 All-State Music Ensemble. So I'll introduce Mrs. Willits to come on up and share one of our students who has been doing some outstanding performing.
You feel like one of the young kids. I have my notes on my phone, which is not everything I've done before, but good evening, esteemed school board directors, Dr. Bitts and community. This is Braden Cavada. We're here to recognize him tonight for his advancement to the state Orchestra Festival in April. And I want to thank you for giving us this opportunity because this is my 23rd year in the district. I'm also a 1998 grad, so I've been here my whole life and also a product of our great music program. But I've never been able to come and have you see, you know, some of the accomplishments that these students do. So thank you for that opportunity. Before I let him say a couple words, I want to take you on a little journey that we started in December. We took a bunch of kids by bus down to Eastern New York and auditioned, and Braden made it into the top. What was the rank? Remember that day? 14 out of 80 some viola players. Braden plays the viola. And that gave him placement into the District 7, the PMEA District 7 Festival. That was held at Manheim Township in January. So we took a busload of kids who made it there. They enjoyed the festival with guest conductor, Dr. Evan Harger from the University of North Carolina Symphony Orchestra. So they got to work with him for 3 days. At that festival, they auditioned again for placement into the Central Region Orchestra Festival. The Central Region Orchestra Festival encompasses a larger swath of Pennsylvania. So it's the Central Pennsylvania region, and then it goes up into Northeastern PA. So that was that was February. We went to Warwick High School, and that was under the direction of Paul Bryan, who is the Director of Orchestral Studies at Westchester University. And then at that festival, Braden had to undergo another audition for placement into state orchestra. And of course he did that. And then in April, we went to the Kalahari Resort and Convention Center with kids from all over Pennsylvania. So it's quite an accomplishment to make it to that level. So proud of them. I was there for the entire festival, was able to do, to observe and to do some clinics there, and then attend the concert. And it's just incredible to see what these kids do. So that was his journey. I don't know if you have any questions for him about his experiences.
When did you start to play?
It was the summer after 3rd grade.
So are you going to continue on?
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, like when you go to college, are you going to, will that be your major or?
Yeah, I'm still trying to figure out what I'm gonna major in specifically, but I'm definitely gonna do something.
Did you have a favorite piece from the different festivals that you were a part of?
I really liked Symphonic Metamorphosis by Hindemith. It's weird. I definitely say it's weird because it doesn't follow a lot of the conventional rules that stuff normally does. And it was just a lot of fun to play.
What made you pick the viola over the violin?
We had I forget what we called it, but some schools call it an
Instrument petting zoo. Yeah.
Where
We're trying to get away from that name, actually. Thanks for bringing that back up.
Back then.
Very nice.
I remember trying to play the violin there and I just couldn't. I don't know. I didn't like the way it sounded. So
Just didn't connect with it.
yeah. And then I played the viola and I was like, wow, yeah, I like that. Special.
I was at the orchestra concert for the night, and I just want to commend you and Mrs. Rose for the culture that I can see so evident among the musicians in the orchestra, the mutual support, and also the words that you had about the importance of music as part of a life well lived. Those were very touching. Congratulations.
Thank you again for this opportunity. Appreciate it.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Still last time, so.
I'm with that.
I was in superintendent.
I know. And we'll move on to item 2.03, Technology Student Association, or TSA. Dr. Betts.
Another group that is here with some of their performance, and I think they have some visuals to share with us as well. We're excited to have Mr. Statler here, who has been a part of TSA, leading TSA for a long time. we're excited to be able to hear about their competitions at the state level as well. So,
I am not one of the young kids, I'm. Well, all is said, I can get started. Good evening. First, I'd like to thank Dr. Bitts and Howard School Board for giving our Technology Student Association the opportunity to share their award-winning project with you tonight. My name is Jim Statler, and I've had the privilege of serving TSA for many years. They've done this many times. Probably about 2 dozen, moving around. For those of you that may be unfamiliar, TSA is an organization where students prepare and compete in a wide range of technology-related events. 40 different categories they can participate in, including areas like animatronics, engineering, architecture, coding, and many more. Our students began their journey at a regional competition that took place at Mountain View Middle School in Cumberland Valley. And these three, Kyle, Levi, and Lars, excelled remarkably, earning both first and second place awards in systems control and manufacturing prototype. But the journey did not stop there. Those who finished in the top 3 at regionals had the opportunity to move on to the state competition held at Seven Springs. The state level is incredibly challenging, with over 100 high schools from across Pennsylvania competing. I always tell my students that placing in the top 10 at states is an achievement in itself, and making it in the top 3 is truly outstanding. I'm proud to announce that our animatronics team placed second at the state level. An incredible accomplishment that reflects our dedication, skills, and passion. Before I turn things over to the students for the presentation, I also want to thank the Wildcat Foundation. Their generous support through EITC funds has made valuable experiences possible for our students by helping to fund travel and competition expenses. Thank you for your time and support. Now please join me in welcoming Kyle, Levi, and Lars to share their amazing project. Go ahead, guys.
Hi, this is Frederick Simpson. We named it after the Frederick Library and the Simpson Library. The competition we had specifically make a robot that would entertain kids in the library. So that's just why we came up with the name Frederick Simpson. This is a bear that would read books to children and it would be displayed in front of the library. And it has 3 different books you can read. Any book can be uploaded, but we chose Pete the Cat, Very Hungry Caterpillar, and One Fish, Two Fish, Red Fish, Blue Fish for the kids to read. Any book can be uploaded to the iPad, and when you walk up to it.
Hello, I'm Frederick Simpson.
The bear speaks. Anybody that walks up to the bear, it greets them and all the lights start to flash. Whenever you want to read a book, the kid has to choose between the 3 options, whatever they think is the more interesting one. For example, say I really wanted to read The Hungry Caterpillar.
You have chosen The Very Hungry Caterpillar by Eric Carle. In the light of a moon, a little egg lay on a leaf. One Sunday morning, the warm sun came up, and pop! Out of the egg came a tiny, very hungry caterpillar. He started looking for some food. On Monday, he ate through 1 apple, but he was still hungry. On Tuesday, he ate through 2 pears, but he was still hungry. On Wednesday, he ate through 3 plums, but he was still hungry. On Thursday, he ate through 4 strawberries, but he was still hungry. On Friday, he ate through 5 oranges, but he was still hungry. On Saturday, he ate through 1 piece of chocolate cake, 1 ice cream cone, 1 pickle, 1 slice of Swiss cheese, 1 slice of salami, 1 lollipop, 1 piece of cherry pie, 1 sausage, 1 cupcake, and 1 slice of watermelon. That night, he had a stomachache. The next day was Sunday again. The hungry caterpillar ate through 1 nice leaf, and after that, he felt better. Now he wasn't hungry anymore, and he wasn't a little caterpillar. He was a big, fat caterpillar. He built a small house called a cocoon around himself. He stayed inside for more than 2 weeks, then he nibbled a hole in the cocoon and pushed his way out, and he became a beautiful butterfly.
I'd like to commemorate the beautiful voice of Lars.
Something else, the construction of it. Yeah, with construction.
No, we're gonna go over the construction of it real quick. So, what I like to call it is made from plywood and pocket screws. So the outside here, as I said, was made from plywood and pocket screws. We made it specifically in this design so that it would be open for kids to be able to see, that it would be at this specific angle on each side. So then no matter where you sit around the bear, you can always see where it is. You can always be looking around at you, and it can be more interactive with the kids. We also made the exoskeleton on the inside out of hardwood, and we made different pieces out of plastic, 3D printed. We created each one of those on a computer program, all custom made, straight from scratch, all the way from the hat to the eyes to the mouth, everything there. We made the chair have holes in the back of it, so then we could put down wires from all the different motors inside of here, and also the tubes that we need to have for the air compression. We put it all the way back down, so then the kids wouldn't be able to see it, and it would be more lifelike to them. We also had it painted specifically, like a log cabin, so then it would be more homey to kids. And we have, as you can see, a picture frame, a fireplace with a mantle. We have all that with the iPad stand to hold the iPad. So we had all that to make it more homey for the kids, so then they would feel more comfortable around the bear. And then in the back, we actually have a drawer that can extend and retract, that we have all of our stuff in. So then Lars can explain what that stuff will do.
So as Levi explained, in the back drawers where we have all the electrical components and pneumatics that control the eyes, the arm, and the head of the bear. We have it connecting via Bluetooth to the app, which we had to make in code. And we also have a Arduino here that is the main mind and thinking. And all of this is very complicated, but we have we have all of our electrical components here that control the bear, and I had to code and set it up so that the Bluetooth module in the back can connect to the bear. So when a kid comes up and they can press the button and interact with the iPad, and then the bear will move and speak. When it goes into uploading new things, it's quite easy. We already have ways for it to do new things. I just have to voice new lines for the bear. So I have to read the book, obviously, and then we can upload it to the bear, and the bear could do it. So theoretically, you could upload any story and it would move and talk like we demonstrate. All right.
Thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you for your time.
I have a statement and a question. First off, you build it to entertain the children, but I found it quite entertaining. I think everybody else did also. And secondly, particularly with the new high school and the additions, and things like that, where did you primarily build it? Like what facilities did you use there?
So we
Did
used
you get into shops?
yeah, we used the wood and metal tech lab. So we use that to cut out each and every piece, to use 3D printers to create every little programmable part, and everything from the eyes to the mouth, all the way down to the arm. So that's where we built everything.
Both of my kids were in TSA for a long time, through middle school and high school, so I know it's a lot of work. So I assume because you came in second, you'll probably go to nationals?
Yes.
So where's nationals this year?
Nashville.
Oh, we were there twice, yeah. We were our summer vacation, so it's really nice. My second question is, where's the gray pants, the white shirt, and the blue jacket?
They actually changed the dress code.
Did they?
Yeah.
I wondered.
It's just a blue shirt now. Blue TSA shirt.
Nothing like seeing 1,000 kids dressed identical. Congratulations, guys.
What
Thank you.
happens to Frederick when you win nationals?
Well, we were hoping we would give it to the Simpson Library for a couple of weeks.
Nice.
The a day or so, so that they can have, the kids can have a chance to take a look at it and interact.
Are those sconces the top function, or there's a wire heading to the one on the right?
Yeah, here.
I didn't see it.
Trigger the motion sensor.
Yeah, if you trigger the motion sensor.
Oh, yeah.
They light up.
Well, I'd like to say excellent voiceover. I was entertained. Actually, I thought that maybe it was using like, voice synthesis program. I thought this was amazing. This is just so smooth, but the recording was perfect. Quick technical question. Are you monitoring the waveform for the mouth move or just kind of moving it as the audio plays or?
Well, to an extent. In the future, when we're planning to go to nationals, we will be monitoring that so we can have it go down and up every single time Laura speaks a word or a sentence or a phrase. So it can better mimic the way he speaks.
That's very good. How many takes did it take you to get the audio?
The very hungry caterpillar took me like 3 or 4 just to get it how I wanted to. And then the other ones, I think the easiest one was Pete the cat. It only took me 2. So.
Lots of big words.
Very nice. Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
On to item 3, athletics, extracurricular, item 3.01, athletic program evaluation revisited. Mr. Graham, Dr. Fitz.
We hit music, we hit some clubs, and now it's time to hit some athletics. It's a good mix here this evening, which is great. It's to think about all the different ways that our students engage in the classroom as well, which we know is part of our beliefs and part of our mission. So tonight is really a presentation that pulls together a few things. For those of you that have been around, you know that several years ago, Mr. Pahanik and a group of stakeholders embarked on a program evaluation related to the athletic department. And Mr. Pahanik's going to share some updates on that program evaluation and quite a few celebrations related to that. Provide some reminders, of course, to those who are just catching up on where we were with that. But then also beginning to look ahead and say, what is next? And Mr. Longwell gave a little bit of a preview there, a little tiny seed. But, Mr.
6.5 million, I think I heard.
Wow.
So he's gonna share some more next steps as well. So couldn't be more thrilled to turn things over to Mr. Pahanik.
Appreciate you having me. I certainly not as talented as the previous 2 groups, but I'll make it through this as best as we can. Dr. Bitts alluded to, we started this process actually back in 2019. Mrs. Huff was actually part of it, helping me get it started. So many of you probably have seen this, so I'm not going to bore you with what we've already done. I'll touch briefly on it, and then I'll kind of talk about the next steps. We finalized this at the end of 2021, beginning of 2022. So we're really looking at 3-4 years ago. We had a group of about 24 people, many stakeholders, like Dr. Bitts said, of coaches, booster club members, administrators, community members, and we really just took a look at our athletic department, where it stood and where we wanted it to go. And we came up with 10 recommendations. And along the way, the recommendations have been implemented since 2021 in a variety of ways. There was policy implications, there was facility implications, so really the whole gamut. So these are there's 8 up there now. I won't read through them all, but they are pretty concrete that I won't say they're done because they are evolving just like anything else in this world. We can always go back and address them, but it's really our foundation of what makes our athletic department what it is today. Next 2 are what we are calling ongoing recommendations. They are two that we have touched on lightly over the past few years and are really diving into. The first one is a facility feasibility study. That was one of the recommendations that came from the group. We had a facility committee come together a couple of years ago to identify some needs across the district, and I'm going to touch on that here a little bit later in the presentation. The next one is a revenue generation plan that we've had a small group meet here in the past year, and that is going to, I'll touch a little bit on it today, but it's something that we are working on to try to generate revenue really for the district, but knowing that the channel of athletics does allow for sponsorships, probably more so than some other avenues across the district that I think we want to spearhead and take advantage of. So since this has been implemented, the program evaluation in 2021, we've had a lot occur within the district. The first one we're going to identify is facilities. You guys have been along the journey with us, approved everything, and we are very grateful for it, but obviously you've been part of the discussions. We have a brand new auditorium. It's awesome. We just have, it's really just the start of it. You guys know that we just had our first couple groups get in here in the past probably 6-8 weeks. So we're excited to embark on our season next year, but really it's in use now, and it has some exciting opportunities with athletics, recreation. So more to come on that. You guys are aware that our gymnasiums all of our elementary schools now have a gymnasium along with the Wildcat Activity Center, the new gymnasium in the high school. The middle school's floor is being redone, so we really had an emphasis on gymnasium, a lot of versatility with gymnasiums. So it's been something that we've identified as an area to improve, and you guys have seen that come along the way. Memorial Park, that was with the combination of the Wildcat Foundation and the Rich Lichtel Foundation and our school board and our district, that we had major improvements down there that included restrooms, ticket booths, an additional press box, many things that we've done down there, which we've been able to host district championships, state playoff games, just a lot of use down there. And then obviously you guys know that we just approved a new track that is going to start here shortly. So those are what I would consider major renovations here at all of our facilities over the past 4 years. And then we've had minor renovations. I won't bore you with those, but those would be the main focuses here. Since 2021, since our program evaluation, we've added additional resources. We have a full-time assistant athletics director, Bob Strickler. We have an administrative assistant that assists myself, as well as the high school programs with Mr. Reedy and Karen Lombardi. We've added additional coaching stipends. We've improved our coaching matrix, which is really the years of service equated to their stipends. And then we've added things such as huddle assist, arbiter pay, Neptune music. Again, things that you guys probably want to hear about, but all things that are helpful in our day-to-day of what we're doing in our department. You've invited us here over the years to celebrate a lot of our successes. So you know a lot of them, but I quantified them as best as I could since the program evaluation ended in 2021. You can read over it. It is an impressive last 4 years amongst our student athletes, our teams, and our coaches. Prior to when I got here, and I'm not saying this because I was here, that I've had anything to do with this. There's a lot of factors, but prior to 2016, we had 3 district championship teams in our whole history of athletics. Since 2021, we've had 4 alone. So that's just within a 4-year time frame that we've, I would say, increased our number. Obviously, everybody remembers our PIAA state championship in field hockey. We've taken on live stream, as many of you are aware. I had our person that runs that, Mike Garland, put together some numbers. Since 2021, we've had 300,000 views on our live stream, which I don't exactly know what that means. It seems like a huge number, so I thought we'd put that on there. But there's a lot of people watching our student athletes compete, which is neat to see. Brett Michaels being one of the 300,000. So we were in 2023, we were named the Mid-Penn Athletic Department of the Year. And I say that because
the additional resources, the additional facilities, the amount of, I'll say support that, not just me, but our department receives, it allows us to probably go deeper than a lot of our athletic departments in our area, and it allows us to go above and beyond, which is why we get recognized for those kind of things. I currently was just voted Mid-Penn president. Again, I don't want to talk about trying to be as humble as possible. Because of some of the things that we've been doing here as a district, and I appreciate it. The last piece on there is I'm a PIAA District 3 committee member. There's 3 representatives in the Mid-Penn out of the 30 schools, and I'm one of those 3. So it just allows us to continue to enhance, I think, student athletes across District 3, but also in our school district alone. Any questions on that before I move on?
Is that the revenue?
That's not the revenue generation. Yeah, you want to see some of that, huh? Fair enough.
I just love that 4th one down. Every team has been represented at the district level at least once in 2021. And it's just so neat year in and year out to see different teams find successes. And this spring really brought it to life for me too. We had a couple that have had tremendous success over the last couple of years that relative to that tremendous success might be considered to have a down year, but we have some other ones that have had maybe some struggles in recent seasons that had amazing years this year, and one that's still even playing.
Yeah, they're competing as we speak. They're on the court right now.
Yeah.
Our boys volleyball team just won their first home playoff game in our gym last week. It was awesome. Those kids are awesome kids, great athletes, but one that we haven't experienced a ton of success in the past 20 years. And, they are representing us well.
And boys lacrosse won their first ever
Yeah.
district game. So.
Well, what's amazing about the 2021, that was like COVID too, so the fact that
Yeah.
it had
Good call.
success during COVID.
So since the program evaluation, we've had some small committees put together, not quite as large as the program evaluation. Dr. Bitts led a few of these, including the fundraising committee. We've had some extracurricular policy that we've reviewed over the past few years. The revenue generation committee was a small group that Mr. Longwell helped me with. I don't have all of our ideas in front of us because that wasn't really why the point of this meeting, but it is something that I do plan on bringing forward soon. But there's just some untapped potential there. And then the last one is the facility recommendation committee that we probably had, I don't know, a dozen or so folks on that, and really identified not just athletic facilities, but facilities across the district and some needs that we felt maybe were not addressed with the construction projects. So those are some of the things I'm going to talk about next. And again, this is really only top line view. There's no concrete numbers or anything like that to bring to you tonight. Really just looking for maybe your endorsement to go down that path and to bring you some further details here in the future. We identified as a group an additional turf field as a need. You guys are aware that we have one down at Memorial Park Stadium. We felt that a second one would allow our programs to not only, it's hard to describe, but scheduling athletics. And in this day and age, everybody wants a turf field. Everybody tends to participate on turf fields throughout the season. There are some postseason requirements that if you are hosting a game in the postseason, you have to participate on a turf field. So right now we are limited to one, and I don't want to sound piggish or anything like that, but you'd be amazed. We put together a little study. Every school in Mid-Penn has at least one turf field now, which is amazing to think about. We've started this, I think, probably less than 20 years ago. When we put our turf field in, we were probably one of a handful that was going down that route. You'll see I put Northside up there as where I would recommend the turf field to go. Again, I can go into details about that. If you have any questions about that, I can answer them, but probably future conversations as far as why that would be the case. Again, we talked about the revenue generation piece. I don't even talk too much more about that. Go ahead.
Did we?
Do you have any questions about that? Like what it could look like? I have a whole laundry list of ideas. There's nothing concrete, but I'll tell you, when we went down the path with fundraising, we tried to be cognizant of our local community members and our businesses, of how much we're tapping into them. We are trying to tie that into maybe more of an approach of an athletic department to tackle that, instead of every booster club going to these local businesses. But we can live stream as a possibility. There's so much out there that I think we can do, and I don't think, not just our district, but I don't think a lot of school districts around our area are utilizing. If you really look at it from a college or a university perspective, there are ideas out there that I think we can use. Number 3 is.
Maybe I'll just add to that, Seth. I think there's some policy implications for the conversation. So I think in the future, you can see some policies coming out in that realm. And then there's obviously some practices of okay, so how do we bring that to life? And whether it is sponsorship packages or live streaming opportunities or signage. And I think once you have some systems put into place, I think it opens the doors to a lot of different options.
And I think there's some philosophical discussions we need to have as a district of what we want to maybe, I don't want to say go after, but we're still an interscholastic competition. Like that's what we're here for. We're not necessarily here to, maybe I shouldn't say this out loud, here to make money off of our student athletes by any means, but there is an avenue out there. And I think it's just something that a larger group needs to come to the table to just understand what we want as a district. The third bullet point is one that I'm bringing to the table. It's unique to bring now because we haven't had a swim season yet. When we started the discussion for a new natatorium 3-4 years ago, the initial conversation was we were not going to start with diving boards. There was a variety of reasons why that was said. We're now at a point, when you go back, we thought we were going to have this season in 24-25 with a swimming pool. So we didn't get in this year. Everybody knows that. Our thought process along the way with our coach and administration was we wanted to start it after this season to allow our program to develop. Because of the swimming pool situation, that wasn't able to happen. There are some implications of when we add diving boards, such as it's really going to be a new team. We need to find a coach. We need to enter into PIAA eligibility as far as what that looks like from a PIAA standpoint. I'm bringing this to the table that I would like to start to explore what that looks like. Our pool was made to outfit diving boards, so whenever it is time to do it, we have the capability to do so. There are going to be budget implications. There's going to be the initial install of diving boards. Then there's going to be the maintenance of the program and the keeping the program moving forward as far as coaches and student athletes and training. So I'm really bringing this forward to allow you guys to ask me any questions on that. I can go into more detail on that, but it is going to be something that my recommendation, all things considered, would be to install them in the school year of 25-26, and we can talk about timing as we move forward throughout the next few months.
So just because a lot of people in the community do ask me about that. So if we were to install them in this upcoming budget school year,
Okay.
then your projection would be potentially having a team the following.
So yeah, timing is everything on this.
How much prep time do you need, like, to?
So let me talk from the PIAA standpoint and the competition standpoint. If you have diving boards within your facility, you have to offer them to both teams to participate. So if a team has a full diving team and we have diving boards in our facility, there are points to be earned by that team. If we don't have divers, we are automatically starting in a deficit at the start of our competition. And I'm not trying to have any gamesmanship here, but if our diving boards are put in after February, now we have 8 months to develop a diving team until the next season. So I'm really saying this, if we're going to do diving boards, it needs to be, I would say, ASAP or February. So if we put them in November, I do think it puts our team at a disadvantage. as far as, they're not, just not gonna be ready.
Because if we were to do it by then we would be penalized if we don't have divers. for the
Correct.
next
If there are
season
divers-
starting immediately after that.
You're
If
correct.
we wait till the season starts and put them in, it gives us a longer period of time once we put it into the
Following.
school.
Correct, correct. And there's a youth program that we would need to get up. Like, there's a lot of things that will go into this once we pull the trigger as far as this is what we're doing. But yes, you, all accurate.
It seems like a chicken and egg issue. You need to build and develop the team,
That's the best way to do it.
and then, but if you do it too soon, then you're out of place. Is there an opportunity to work with other facilities in time to get that?
So, yeah, so we've had divers at Mechanicsburg before. Not to go into too many details, but we had to pay a diving aid that actually coached multiple schools. And we would send our divers to a school, whether it was Cumberland Valley, it was really wherever she was holding practices. And they would go practice with her. But we've had divers that competed at the district level. But again, our old pool didn't have diving boards, so it was a moot point. But then when we would travel to a natatorium with diving boards, we did compete at that, so we weren't automatically at a deficit to start. So, good
How
question.
many divers, what would the minimum be? Like, what constitutes a diving team?
So you can have one. So now most, even just like you would expect, more numbers the better, but there are 13 points awarded. I have to double check if it's 3. You probably need 3 to 4 to compete to
actually be able to.
Yes.
Right.
Boys and
Correct, yes, fair enough, boys and girls, males and females. Yeah.
So you need low boards and high boards?
No, but yeah.
1 meter, correct, is the.
Yeah, now there is, a lot of the new pools have 2 swimming boards, but that's something we can talk about at a later time, whether we would do 1. You really only need 1 to compete, but a lot of them for practice purposes to ask for 2, but that could be another conversation on down the road.
If we have 2 mounts.
Correct.
Installed. So
Correct.
we have the potential to do 2.
And that's really for more practice than it is for the competition.
So really, it's kind of a matter of seeing if there is interest and then developing that at some point.
Yeah, if you build it, they will come, or do you have them come first and then build it? Yeah, so, yeah.
Do we have any divers currently?
So there's nobody that competed for diving for us this year. Now, again, some of that, it makes you wonder, well, kids don't see there's diving boards, maybe they're not, one, they don't know there's an avenue to do so, or maybe there's no interest, we don't have a youth program, so.
Plus, they would have to practice it, transport themselves to another facility,
So
right?
that's how we did it. We would have the parents sign a waiver, send us an email saying that they allowed it, or they took their son or daughter in the past.
I think the good news is we have policy around the steps that need to be taken. 123.1, 2, something in there under 123, to be able to say, here's what needs to happen in order to get this up and running. I think because really a lot of this is going by plan. We said we want a season of just swimming in the pool, and then we would work on adding the diving piece. And unfortunately, it's a season later, as you pointed out, than what we originally intended, but I think we're still on a good trajectory.
But that was more sort of delayed pool.
Correct.
Being finished,
Yes.
right, not anything that anybody did.
Right.
Internally, right.
So the last bullet, and Dr. Bitts referenced policy 123, addition of a new team. We've received some inquiries about adding a middle school track team. Just so you know, middle school track is sponsored by the Mid-Penn. We do not have a team, and I don't want to be negligent, or I don't know the history of why we don't have a middle school track team. It just isn't something that we have. We have a recreation program that does allow 7th and 8th graders to compete. So there is an opportunity there, but of all the sports that we have, that's probably the one that the Mid-Penn sponsors that we don't. So it does meet our policy. We have a brand new track coming. I think that's part of the excitement. So it's just something that I want to explore with our administration and our track and field coach about what that looks like. And the logistics, the budget implications, but it is something that we have begin to look at.
And that would generally be like a no-cut program, correct?
That would be the goal.
Which I think is always great about track and field.
It's
Like
very
anybody,
inclusive. Yep.
more or less anybody can participate in that sense. Yep.
Yeah, and our numbers are growing significantly at the high school level. I think you could probably say maybe this would give a chance for our athletes to see if it's something they want to continue on at the high school level. I do think it's a feeder program that we don't have. Our track field team have been successful in their own right, but I do think it's something that when you look at all of our other varsity sports, if there's a chance for a feeder program from a PIAA mid-pen perspective, we haven't, other than our track and field team.
I think we're the largest school that does not have.
Yeah, I believe that's accurate.
But we did have a track at the,
Yeah,
behind Elmwood.
so there's a track at middle school, it's a cinder track, it would need some work. I've started to talk to some of my colleagues, they actually have their middle school team practice at the high school. Now, that's a lot of schools that have middle school on campus at the high school. Obviously, our middle school is not on campus. Those are things that I need to come with some more detail to you guys about, but those are things, good questions.
I was just gonna say, that program, just watching that unfold over the last couple of years, it has a ton of interest. I know the kids are definitely looking to join the track team because of it. So it definitely works well as a feeder program. Nice addition.
Yeah, I touched base with our recreation department last week about it. It sounds like it's really practices. They don't necessarily go and compete at different locations, but it is, so it may be something that we could take a step further as far as develop.
So when we put the turf at the football stadium, was that $250,000? Way more than that.
Replaced it last, I think it was around
400,000 when we replaced it.
But the original install price, I'm not sure. I'd have to look at it.
So you're looking,
It's probably not 6.5.
You can say it.
it's between 1.5 and 1.8 would be a start to finish.
Really?
At 1.5 million is probably the going rate these days.
Well, plus there's more
Drainage.
Correct, and that's part of the reason I would suggest north side, we have the lights, the concession stand, the bathrooms. There's just the infrastructure there is already there.
I think that's a really good point, Mr. Mike, because I think even when we talked about that, like kind of that 1.5 through 1.8, it surprised me a little bit. I thought it would seem a little lower because you read in the newspaper about some of our neighbors or you see people install turfs, but I think it's because of the infrastructure. And so some schools, when they're installing turf, they're doing it alongside the lights and concession stand facilities where north side's already primed in that way. And honestly, it's just a turf field. There's a number there that's associated with it, but it's probably not as expensive as it otherwise could be because of some of the existing infrastructure.
Any other questions?
Quick question about live streaming, 300,000 views, what events are being like? Events?
So our stance, it's really started another COVID conversation since 2020. We sort of played to our community that because we couldn't have spectators, that we were going to try to live stream as many events as we could. Well, that sort of took on a life of its own, and we also have some people in our community that are very talented at doing this. So we have done basically all of our football teams are streamed, all of our home winter sports are streamed. That's boys and girls basketball and wrestling, and then we choose 2 home events for every other varsity sport throughout the year. That's sort of been our standard, and there's reasons why we do it that way, but yeah, that's. Right, that is all I have, I believe, so appreciate everybody's time. Thank you. Get out of it. Thanks.
Thank you. And you can take some credit on the success we've had with the last year.
Thanks. You won't get him to do it, but we will keep keeping it on him.
We'll go on to item 8, policy. Just gonna read all 4 that have been right now in case we overlap with them. That way they're in the record. 8.01, first reading of revised board policy 233, suspension and expulsion. 8.02, first reading of revised board policy 815.1, use of generative artificial intelligence in education. 8.03, first reading of revised board policy 907, school visitations. 8.04, first reading of revised board policy 916, volunteers. Dr. Fitz.
Yeah, we'll be jumping around a little bit here with some different folks who have taken the lead with these policies, but the first one goes to Dr. Bowman.
233, not very extensive. As you read through it, you'll see that PSBA introduced a new kind of definition of UR revision to the compulsory school age information found in the attendance section. They also added a reference to policy 113.4, which deals with the confidentiality of special ed student information, specifically in the disciplinary situations listed in this policy. And then also under the delegation of responsibility section. It also had some minor revisions in the policy, grammatic changes to terminology that is now more current than it was before, dealing with safety and so forth, and also updated some of the legal citations to make sure that we were covered with liability.
Questions for Dr. Bo?
I have a quick question. Is there a policy in departments about using AI like ChatGPT, say large language models in writing or student department, generating ideas?
So Mrs. Woodward is going to get to that when we get to
Okay.
815.1. I don't want to steal her thunder.
Absolutely.
All right, any other questions? Move that forward. You want that on the June 10th agenda?
Yes, please. Yep.
Second and final vote.
Then 815.1 will be Mrs. Woodall.
It was a packed house until it wasn't.
That's right.
That's true.
Set cleared on.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for having me here today. I put together a presentation for policy 815.1 on generative artificial intelligence just because it is a beefier policy. It's also a policy that we currently don't have, so it's not a revision. This is a brand new policy being recommended by PSBA. The core focus of this policy is more on the responsible use of generative AI for educational opportunities and also to streamline some operational efficiencies and better prepare our students for a future that increasingly demands critical thinking, adaptability, and digital literacy. Just for clarity of this presentation, I'm going to define generative AI here from the University of Virginia's definition, and I'm going to read it. It's a machine model's ability to create new content, such as text, images, music, or human voices. So generative AI is not thinking. So if you're using ChatGPT or Gemini, it's not thinking. It's literally just an algorithm that utilizes predictions from one word, and then it predicts the next word and the next word. So it's just basically predictions from words that are put into it. So there's no thinking yet with generative AI. To start this process, we actually formed a generative AI committee. This work started back in October for policy 815. And really what we were looking to do is just research and form our stance on what do we believe is generative AI's use in our district here at Mechanicsburg before we went through and started looking at PSBA's policy recommendations. So this committee consisted of elementary and secondary administrators, as well as district administration, elementary teachers, secondary teachers. The secondary teachers we had representatives from the core areas of science, math, social studies, and English language arts. Additionally, we had K-12 teacher representation from art, music, library. And then we also had English language development and special education representation as well. And in addition, we had some non-instructional staff as part of that because we were looking again at the operational efficiencies as well when we started looking at what our beliefs were here. So our committee had 4 main goals, which was to investigate the current and potential uses of artificial intelligence with Mechanicsburg Area School District. With that, we actually sent out a survey to all K-12 staff on how they were currently utilizing generative AI. And we also sent it out to 6th and 12th grade students just to get a pulse. It was anonymous, so
You know, we could see if kids, and some kids did answer that they were using it for some less critical thinking utilization, but a lot of students were using it for brainstorming. And then we also had students that never even heard of it, had no idea what we were talking about with that survey. Now, that was back in October. I would be interested in what we would get for results today, just a few short months later. We also looked at researching the implications on educational practices, data privacy, operations, and equity and bias. So when we look at equity and bias specifically, like equity, like who has access to using generative AI and who doesn't, and how do we make it more equitable? And then the biases that are created from utilizing AI. It's programmed by human beings, so there is inherently bias in what it is that you receive there. So we did some research and investigation into that. And then the committee recommended next steps in guiding staff and students. And part of that recommendation was this policy, as well as like administrative regulations and frameworks to help with guiding the staff and students moving forward. So with the policy and practices, we took the feedback from the AI committee and we actually created first our AI position statement. So this statement utilized what the committee found out to create like our powerful, like, this is what we believe here is our philosophies on generative AI use. And then we created some guiding principles underneath that stance. Those guiding principles had to look at what the committee's recommendations were for educational practices moving forward, AI learning for staff and students, data privacy and security, as well as our implementation commitments as an administrative group. With that, we took it back to the AI committee just to ensure that we accurately reflected their feedback after that we created that position statement. Then we also took it to A-Team, our department coordinators and our grade level coordinators, again, just for feedback on the position statement, because we utilized this as our grounding document when reviewing policy 815 from PSBA. So as I'll go through here in a few moments, when we started reviewing policy 815.1 from PSBA, there are going to be some deletions from the policy based off of our position statement. We did send that back to our solicitor just to make sure that we weren't deleting some information that we shouldn't remove from a policy. And he was very good with the feedback that we had there. He actually did add a few things that were not in PSBA's policy, and I'll talk about that here in a few moments as well. Along with the policy for 815.1, we utilized the position statement to create our administrative regulations for 815.1, which provides more details for those guardrails. And we've also utilized that to create an MASD generative AI acceptable use scale. So this scale, I think, is what you're talking about, where we're going to utilize that to communicate with students. When is it appropriate to utilize AI for a learning task? What citations do you have to make for it? And when is it not appropriate to use? We're actually going to be piloting that acceptable use scale with our department coordinators in the fall. And then they're going to get feedback as when you create rubrics, there's always the first time that you create them, you get it back and you're like, oh, this didn't actually work the way we wanted it to. So our department coordinators have said like, hey, we'll take this and then we'll give you feedback on how it actually works when you do use it to communicate with students.
So that acceptable use scale, is that going to attempt to detect what percentage of the document or the paper or whatever it is deemed to be?
So no, the acceptable use scale would be like me as a teacher. I say, okay, here's a learning task. And for this specific learning task, you can use generative artificial intelligence to help with grammar check on this, because that's not really the main learning that I care about from this learning task. Like I care about looking more at some of your thinking skills. So you can use it for a grammar check, but you have to cite it and send me the chat link that you have with it. So it helps to communicate with students when they can use it and when they can't use it, because there are going to be some learning tasks where you absolutely can't use it at all. And there are going to be some learning tasks where as a teacher, you might say, hey, you might use this as a partner, somebody that you're conversing with to do a peer edit of a piece of work that you have or something to that level. So that's what that acceptable use scale is going to be for, is that communication with students saying, no, this time you can't use it, but this time you can. And it's to create that consistency. So it's not just one teacher says it's okay and one teacher doesn't like, we're utilizing the same meat language to communicate with students.
Right, because there's an enhancement there's a tool, Turn It In, where you can submit and it goes through to see if you're copying from somebody else. But that tool also has an AI percentage, or it's their version of an assessment to it. So we often get that report back. This paper was 97% AI generated, or this paper was 25%. And we would assume if it comes back 25%, they were doing it for, I don't speak perfect English, or I don't write perfect English, so I let it go and create a more intelligent paper for me. But it's not creating the ideas, it's improving on what I've built, as opposed to, create me a paper on American Revolution, and it comes out and spits out of everything. So we've used Turn It In to use that tool to find out that percentage of use.
Yeah, I've used Turn It In as well, and I think the problem is that there's no detector out there that's accurate. There's no foolproof way.
Yes, so I will actually get into
Okay,
that
I will-
as part of the policy recommendations for that, because there's also some bias in what you submit with those documents. So I'll get into that in just a few. Go ahead.
One other quick question, just out of curiosity, not concern. Who made up the committee? Was it people like the district level, or was there staff members of the community? I was just curious.
Yeah, so we had K-12, like we had elementary teachers that were representatives. And we went to our department coordinators, our principals to help pull some of the representation, but it's elementary teachers were parts of that, secondary teachers, teachers from special education, English language learners, our English language development teachers. And then, like I said, some non-instructional support staff too, just
It
to,
was all internal.
it was all internal. We haven't reached out to the community yet for this. because
To
we were
other
trying to build
districts.
up
I didn't know the extent.
Yeah. We were trying to build our own knowledge,
Right.
because I'll say going into this, my knowledge was very rudimentary.
Well, and it's so,
And I'm still far from an expert, but I'm at least getting a little bit more knowledgeable and can utilize the language.
She's not giving herself enough credit.
but it's also so fastly growing. I mean, it's
Yeah.
just gonna.
In 2 minutes, the conversation will be different.
So 100%. So, and that leads into some of our policy recommendations too, with how quickly it is evolving there. So as I said, with the committee, we utilize that position document to help with the policy. The first thing that you'll see is the purpose. We scratched out PSBA's language there, and we actually copied and pasted our position statement opening paragraph, because that really formulates what our beliefs are about the use of generative artificial intelligence. And then moving from that purpose, we decided to keep in the PSBA's language for authority. We felt that that language did align with our position statement that we created. It helps us to guide, it helps to guide us with all of the mandatory federal and state laws, as well as our previous policies that align to this, such as 815 acceptable use. 815.1 is just a more detailed version of acceptable use with artificial intelligence, generative artificial intelligence. We also looked at, we also put in there that the district does not endorse or guarantee that that what you're getting from AI is accurate. AI does have the ability to hallucinate, they call it. So you can type in something and it will just make up a response. And you have to have a little bit of background knowledge so you can know that response doesn't seem accurate. Also, a lot of the free models have been trained with information that ended in 2021, 2022. So obviously we're 3 years removed from that training. So you're not receiving the most updated information from the free versions. The paid versions have more updated training for it. So if you're paying for whatever the most recent GPT is, or Gemini or something like that, it has been trained with more recent information, but a lot of the free information or the free open sources have some outdated information. And we did make some changes with the PSBA recommendation for definitions, just based off of what we were utilizing as a committee from the University of Virginia. Some of the terminology that they used, we felt was better representative of what we saw in the committee compared to the definitions that they used. for PSBA. So some minor changes with those definitions. When we're really getting into the meat of the policy, our key here is transparency and flexibility. So transparency, we did add, and this was after the recommendation of our solicitor, that this policy will go into student handbooks. So it's simply just to make sure that students and families have a copy of this policy in front of them, because it does set up the guidelines and guidance for how we believe generative AI should be utilized here as a district. We did remove the prior parental consent for allowing the generative AI tools. So that was a checkbox recommendation from PSBA. The reason why we removed that is we do view generative artificial intelligence as a learning tool, like a textbook or Kahoot or something like that. And we don't ask for parental consent for using Kahoot or for using the specific textbook. So we did say, well, generative AI is a tool. We don't ask for parental permissions to utilize other tools. We do believe, though, that we do need student training with that, like student professional learning and how to utilize it. Well, student learning and staff professional learning and how to utilize it. And also staff supervision of the students when they are using it, as well as our guiding principles for how it should be utilized. So we do have those guide rails, so it's not just the wild, wild west of using generative AI. We also removed the portion about AI tools and resources being evaluated. We removed that from our AR as well. The reason for that, again, is for flexibility. So the rapid expanse of generative AI, we could go through in the summer of this year and have our group, and we actually talked about this. We had some procedures written out of these are the people that will be involved in looking through the different tools and approving them for privacy and everything to that level. But then when we started to think about it, we're like, what we approve in the summer by October might not even be relevant anymore, right? So, and how can we truly keep track of that without it being a full-time job, if not even more than a full-time job for one person to be able to go through? So what we did say is our guiding principles that we created as part of our position statement really sets those left and right limits for what do we believe for how these tools should be used and what tools should be used and what we need to think about when we're using these tools. So we put those into the administrative regulation to help to create, like, this is your limit. These are your lanes. Stay within those lanes when you're choosing a tool to use with your students for student learning. And then we also took the specific verbiage out about teacher professional development and student learning and hiring practices. And we put that into the administrative regulation. Again, just to add for flexibility, because we don't know what tomorrow is going to hold for generative AI. So, instead of me coming back to you every month asking for policy revisions, just keeping those kind of things that are more flexible and more for operational purposes in the administrative regulations. And then academic integrity. So Mr. Bradley, this is what you were talking about here. First and foremost, we did put the teacher use and student citations. We took it out of, again, the policy and put it into the AR for that flexibility purposes. So they are in the AR and how we're going to use and cite the use of generative AI. In fact, that specifically is part of that scale that we've created that our department coordinators are going to pilot next year, and talks about how students are supposed to cite and when they're supposed to cite their utilization of generative AI. We also dropped the teacher inclusion and lesson plans from the policy and the AR. Again, we don't look at lesson plans, and for a teacher, they don't say, I'm using Kahoot here. So again, our viewpoint is if we're viewing generative AI as a tool, we don't have our teaching staff list out every single tool that they're using as part of their lesson plans. The most important part here, though, is the prohibition of using AI as the sole determinant in academic integrity. So it is a great tool to use to say, I have a little concern, this might not be the student's voice, but we're saying that it can't be the sole thing. You need to look at other writings examples that the students have put in.
and other information to have that scrapbook approach to looking at the academic integrity purpose for it. Just going beyond the fact that it is a machine, so it is fallible. It's not perfect. We as humans are also fallible, but we know our students' work when we see it, and we can say, like, we can point to other resources that help to clue us into that. But when we look at something like turnitin.com or GPT-0 is one that's used a lot as a tool to see if students or anybody is copying and plagiarizing using any sort of generative AI. Evidence has shown that those tools are disproportionately biased against those who speak non-conventional English. Intriguingly enough, back when ChatGPT first became a thing and GPT-0 became a thing, I just put some of my writing into it just because I was curious. My own writing was coming up like 70% AI generated. So at first I was like, man, I'm an amazing writer. And my professors always told me in college I was an amazing writer. I was a science major, by the way. So that tells you how great they were at writing as well. But I was like, wow. And then when I went to a couple professional learnings, they're like, oh yeah, it's biased against those people who cannot write and speak in conventional. So yeah, if I use GPT for something, the difference between that and my actual writing really isn't much different. So thinking though about our English learning population and some of our students from lower socioeconomic status, so like we don't want to create that bias where we're using GPT-0 and saying, you didn't write this because 60% of it came up as a 60% probability that it was AI generated.
And that's really crucial because if we tell a student you've been using AI and we make some form of charge and take points off their score, we're grade wise, it absolutely is not accurate. And that's a big problem because even with a 1% flaw in the predictability rate, that's still a 1% chance that kid didn't use AI. And if a teacher cannot simply say, I think you use AI, you're getting a deduction, because I think that's where we're going to get into trouble as a district across any, yeah, and there's kids that won't speak up. Like if the teacher says, I'm giving you a C because it said you were 50% use of AI, and the kid's like too shy to say anything. Or if the child tries to defend himself or herself and says, I didn't use AI, and then it becomes a battle of wills, because there really is no way to have an accurate assessment if it was used or not. Like you said, my colleague is a great writer, and she came up as 99% AI generated. She was, I just wrote that myself. So it's a problem.
But the same thing applies as well. If you have a student and you know that student and you know that student struggles with creating properly formed sentences, their thoughts are there, it's all jumbled up, and then all of a sudden you get something that is perfectly written, beautifully, they're using the $25 words instead of the 5-cent words, and that's not part of their normal conversation. So it goes into not just looking at the numbers, and that's the one thing. We look at the numbers and then we go back and say, okay, let me look at what they submitted previously that may not have had anything, and in their conversation, their mastery of the English language is not that great, and all of a sudden they're writing like an English major so eloquently. That's when you start to say, okay, there might be a little something going on.
And that's what I've done in the past. You have to have the student admit, I used AI. And unless they say that, I used AI. There's not a lot that the teacher can do, I'm afraid, because you can make an accusation, say this is really brilliant. You had to use AI, and it's like, wait till the parents get it. Like my son is brilliant, because that's a problem, because unless you get them to say, like, this does not sound like you're writing, did you use AI? I think this is an interim phase where if the student admits that they used it, we can go on that admission as a sense of, okay, well, there's a deduction for that because you didn't cite it, you didn't claim you were using it in your works cited or whatever. But I think we have to be really careful in accusations of using it, because even if it sounds like they totally used it, there's no 100% way of
detecting it and saying it's failed, it's full.
So I work for UPenn and we can't even, I mean, the marketing department, I mean, we just cannot even begin to start using it. We were encouraged to start using it for emails. I sent out an email using it one time and I got right back, are you okay? Like,
Because-
totally. was
Because it's not your town.
Not
Like-
human trace.
But I just, I mean, I'm not. I guess I'm concerned about teachers versus, I mean, that you didn't bring in maybe somebody that's more of an expert that has already, you know, put their career towards this, that they've, you know, up the bumps and stuff like that. That do you have enough knowledge? Because I'm like, this just sounds like a nightmare fighting with every child, what percentage they use for AI. And it just doesn't seem like it's something every teacher's gonna want to take on. So my concern is,
It is.
how are we gonna control it?
The reality is they're taking it on now.
Yeah.
We're already a couple years too late in some department areas. So I think the important thing is that there's the policy, then there's the practices and regulations and the ongoing training. And the reality is that we needed to be able to address the policy piece in order to provide that foundation for the practices to continue to build, the training to continue to build. And obviously probably the most practical short-term application is the rubric of, what is the use expectations by a teacher on any particular task. So I think that'll be a neat thing for our teacher that they're looking forward to being able to have that in hand to be able to guide some of that decision making next year. But there will absolutely be more experts, more training, more learning about all of this.
Yeah, we are
We've had
fortunate.
several experts come in and give presentations to us, and it's like,
We are very fortunate where there is an expert with generative AI who works out of Millersville, and he was a former physics teacher, like he was a practicing educator. So he can wear both hats as to like, I'm an expert in this now, but I can reflect back to how would this be useful for me when I was in the classroom? And how would I meander and manipulate around this? In fact, we were fortunate enough to hear him. I've gotten to hear him speak 2 or 3 times. But he literally lives right down the street from my house too. So he's not far away, which is a great asset to have.
like you said, to keep up with it is a full-time job, and like, you know, we're not gonna hire a person that's gonna be a full-time job.
And that's one of the things they're talking about, like going after try to block and do the.
It's like saying years ago, students can't use calculators in math. It's like, wait a second. It's like.
Well, it's playing
It's a learning
whack-a-mole.
tool.
As soon as you
Yeah,
whack this
yeah.
mole, another mole's popping up over there. Realistically, like that is how it is. So
It's tough for teachers. It adds a lot of work to like you said, to their job description, to go through the edit history and look at the revision history and on a Google document and see if there's anything cut and pasted into this document. It's a lot. And I want to make sure that the teachers are putting themselves out there and saying, this is a penalty that you used AI because it's really hard.
I think that's the education piece though for our teachers too, and you're seeing a lot of them already make adjustments where before maybe you let your students go a little more independently for longer periods of time, and now you're planning and building in those checkpoints. And so you're getting to know your kids and you're getting to know their writing and their roadblocks. So along the way, you're seeing that progression right in front of you. So it's not as much of a guessing game in the end when you're consistently checking in with your students along the way.
Absolutely. That's true.
and like I said, it's going back to other sources of evidence, just like you were saying, Mr. Bradley. It's not just about 99%, but it's going back and saying, okay, I've seen your handwriting on these do nows and how you speak with this. Like, I don't know if you're creating this piece of work.
But you're asking a teacher to be kind of an expert on like if she has 100 students, she's not gonna know exactly.
Welcome to the new profession.
Yeah. How can we make our learning tasks AI resistant?
Yeah.
So how can we go through and make it so. I mean, I remember when I first learned about this in October of 2022, is that when it came out? 2022, October? But I mean, I remember I went to my computer, I said, I want to try this thing out. I said, type me a 5-page paper on A Tale of Two Cities and blah, 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 and the author's perspective, and
When you
out.
say, make it look like a ninth grader wrote this,
Yeah.
and they'll actually put in like some flaws.
whipped it out, and then.
Yeah, you can ask, yeah,
Yeah.
you can put different levels of reading
You know,
and
it's
stuff in it.
ironic, a great way to like have AI resistant assignments is to tell AI to develop an AI resistant assignment and it'll actually recommend stuff. That's where we are now. Catch 22.
Now, what are they using to write these papers? Is it usually like Google Docs or something?
Usually they're using Google Docs. I will say some teachers have reverted back to handwriting papers to try to make it so it's not.
Well, I guess I'm just wondering, is there some feature, and maybe this is something you think of, that you can replay the actual.
Yeah, you can go back and look at the historical edits.
So obviously you see,
Yeah.
and you know.
Yeah, you can go through and look at the historical edits in a Google Doc. You can say like, oh, okay, you had one sentence and then all of a sudden you have 7 paragraphs entered in 5 minutes. Like that doesn't make sense if you can do that.
That just seems like a nightmare for every teacher.
And we use AI to determine if the student actually wrote.
That's sort of using that GPT-0 type thing, where it is using AI to detect AI, but in itself, that's imperfect.
Tracy, I think that's where we believe that hopefully that skill that we build in can become powerful too, when departments collaborate together and start to look at where students might be using or could use AI, and really clearly define at what level they're allowing them to use it. So they're combating it in that way too. There's never going to be a perfect method moving forward because the AI develops faster than we can develop with it. But I think that's, number one, educating our kids on and reminding them about integrity too, and true learning. Like if you're just going to base your experience on AI and then you go out in the real world, it's going to be hard to fake it at that point. So just, real learning, valuing learning and education, integrity and character. And when you turn something in and your name's on that, it means that it was your work, at least within the parameters allowable by the person who assigned it. So those are the things that we have to continue to reinforce for our kids.
And one of the things that I do wonder, one of the workshops that we participated in, they quoted some research from, I think it was UCLA back towards like August, September-ish, that looked at the level of reported cheating, 15, 20 years ago, and the level of reported cheating with generative AI. And the levels were pretty much the same. So kids 15, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, whenever I was in school, were just as likely to cheat. The same kids cheating then are the same kids that are cheating now. And you still have a high percentage of kids that aren't cheating their way through the system. So that is, I think, an important thing to think about is it's always been cheating. And the percentages really haven't changed. It's just the tool that's being used is changing what that looks like.
There's great uses for it. I was teaching rhetorical devices. And if the kid's writing a paper about mowing the lawn, and you say, put in rhetorical devices related to mowing the lawn, and has metaphors, similes, it has anaphora, it has rhetorical questions, and the kid's like, this is really, and they learn so much more about how rhetorical devices work in this by using AI to generate examples for them. And then that gave them kind of the idea of like, oh, that's how I can make an original metaphor. I can use not just that they have to use AI, but it gives them the kind of, it models the thinking process. No, it's not thinking, but it models the predictive element of like how to create these things. And so it can be a really useful tool to use in the classroom. I've used it.
It's a very, very powerful tool to
It is.
utilize, but believe it's Spider-Man with great power. Comes great responsibility. Not quite sure. I'm not up to date on my
That's really unfair. Let's not credit Spider-Man for that. It's Uncle Lester.
He was the mentor.
Oh, okay, all right. Again, I'm not positive of my superheroes. I'm pretty happy that I. Right.
All right.
So with that, are there any other questions for discussion? Thank
Good
you all.
luck.
Yes,
Going
thank
to
you
work.
very much.
Great work, great team.
Good job. It's a great new world.
Thanks, Sherry.
The last two, 907 and 916, these somewhat go together, will be Mr. Bingham.
All right. I'll try to follow that one up. Just a month ago, Mr. Kirkline asked a question. And his question was related to one of the policies that we came out with regarding the differences between visitors and volunteers. And lo and behold, in the next month's bounty of policies was 907 and 916. And 907 talks about the process and procedures of utilizing or having school visitations set up where people can come into our buildings and the processes and procedures that need to occur in order for that to happen. Most of those day-to-day operational things lie in 2 administrative regulations. However, the policy recommendations from PSBA that were brought forth included consistent processes and procedures for safety in the school setting and outlining methods for the opportunities for visitors to come into our schools and language associated with what would happen if they didn't follow expectations. So that is the guidance from policy 907. Then we get into policy 916, which is talking about volunteers and volunteers and the formalized definitions that were in the policy were sparse. PSBA made some recommendations on the definition or the terms that were associated and used within the policy that were added to the definition section. And then we modified the definitions for visitor and volunteer to align with the actual citations in the public school code as opposed to some of the language that was used from PSBA, like a volunteer is more than a visitor and a visitor is less than a volunteer. Not really helpful in defining the terms. So therefore, we removed the Merriam-Webster definitions from the proposed policy and used the straight guidance from that. And from that created a need for us to delete the difference between a position volunteer and a guest volunteer because that added to the level of confusion. However, in the process of doing so, I will take responsibility for this. I neglected to, on page 3, remove 7 erroneous, now obsolete single term of for the volunteer with regard to the position volunteer. So in the second reading of the policy, those 7 position volunteers that are located on page 3 of 5 will just say volunteer instead of position volunteer. So I apologize for that error of not removing that when we removed the definitions for the classifications of volunteers that were listed as position and guest volunteer. So with that, are there any questions that are associated to the citation updates, the language updates, the definitions that were added to either policy 907 or 916?
I have a question under volunteers where it says the definition for volunteer.
Yes.
It says an adult who offers a service to the district without receiving compensation from the district, not a school employee, that has no direct contact or supervision of students. That doesn't make sense to me. I thought the volunteer does have direct contact. Because like if I'm on a field trip with somebody and I'm left alone, I would have direct contact and supervision, right? So should it be that has direct contact instead of the word no should be gone?
The citation that comes that's associated number 10 specifically stipulates that a volunteer would work under the direct supervision of school staff. So even though that volunteer would have a group, that group would report to a teacher or be under the direction of a teacher with regard to their service in that capacity.
Which is that last sentence where it says a volunteer would work directly under the supervision of the school staff.
Right.
The sentence before that, though, still seems odd to me, but is that their language? That it says
That's the language directly from the citation from number 10.
Yeah, I think we'll take another look at that because I think there's.
Yeah, I think it was that, one of the organizations we're involved with says that interaction must be visible and interruptible. So obviously, if you're in a classroom, because I know when we did the junior achievement, I was in the classroom, I was in with another partner, which was good.
Right.
But making sure that the teacher had visibility into that classroom, so it wasn't like we were alone with the students. So,
What about like a field trip with the different groups? Would there have to be a teacher assigned each group, or could the groups be?
So if you're in order to be a volunteer, you have to have contact with students that may or may not be self-supervised or regular interactions. So on a field trip, we can't guarantee that you're not going to be alone with students. So that's why anybody who goes on a field trip has to be a registered volunteer. Because
Okay, so they have to go through the process. Because they could be left, they could have a group.
Correct.
Independent of other, right,
Go in the bathroom or whatever.
or even splitting up in a museum or what have you.
But if you come into a classroom party, at all times during that time, there's a teacher right there, so you can just transfer for that. It's not routine, not alone with students. So yeah, I think there's some editing that got thrown off here, but we'll get it, as Mr. Bingham said, we'll get it corrected for the final version.
Catch it with AI.
It's AI's fault, yes.
Yeah. there you go.
No, we did not use AI. It actually went out to organization.
I said we can.
Because I wouldn't have this there if it was AI. That's smarter than me.
We can correct it with AI is what I said.
well, I apologize for starting the pot. I hope.
No. It was on the docket, ironically. It was just one of those things that, you asked a very good question last month, and lo and behold, that was the next and final two policies that were my responsibility this year.
Do we need, since there's gonna be some revisions to that, do we want to just move forward with the first three and hold that and do a first reading again, or are we okay with?
Well, I mean, technically, the second reading could be different.
I will say this, the actual changes to 916 are not actually material.
Right.
They appear at the moment to be material because of the document, but I think we could certainly share with you the updated version, weekly update, and then present it as a separate.
But to Rick's point, if they would become material, then we would have to
We would have
reconsider.
to redo a version.
Yes, if it's clearly house cleaning, I think we're okay, but. Especially if you want them done, like, so not public next board, so still want to have a July.
In that case, we would wait until.
Yeah, I'm just saying, if it's a material change, Rick, I think then we have to look at it.
Okay, I'm good with that. Thank you.
Any other questions on any of the policies? All right, Mr. Bingham, saying no, meeting is adjourned, and we will finish up very quickly on.